Clarkston, Washington, early June, present day. Mitch Wilcom closed the screen door carefully and groped his way across his front porch in the dark. His recital wide-brimmed hat perched on his head and his Justin Roper pinch in his hand. He would have liked to have thrown the porch light on, but that would probably wake Mock, who insists on sleeping with the curtains pulled back to let the cool air stream through the windows. That didn't make much sense to Mitch, the Atherton County Sheriff. First of all, even though it was barely 4 a.m., the temperature was stuck in the mid-70s. The whole week had been a scorcher, baking the Paulus, a long stretch of high desert plains that dominated the far lands where Washington, Idaho, and Oregon come together. For another thing, Mitch had paid good money for a pair of Mitsubishi mini splits to air condition their sprawling farmhouse. Having reached his mid-60s, it was hard enough to get a good night's sleep, and the whole point of the Mitsubishis was to cool the house down, to make it feel like October year-round, his favorite month. But Molly had her ways. In 35 years of marriage, told him the argument wasn't worth it. So here he was, tiptoeing across his porch in the dark like some kid trying not to awake his girlfriend's father. At the bottom step, he pulled on his boots, then crunched across the gravel to the pole barn where he parked his John Deere. His 57 T-Bird tarp to keep the barn swallows from destroying it, and his official Ram police truck. He fished through his pocket for the key to unlock the tiny office built into the front of the barn, then punched in the numbers to his gun safe. It took him a few minutes to get his police belt on with his Glock 22 and lodged his pump-action 12 gauge into the socket that straddled the Ram's transmission hump. He settled behind the truck's wheel, angling his elbow to avoid touching the computer rig. Once he stabbed the ignition button, the noisy diesel would sound off. And again, because Molly had the windows open, probably woke her, but what could he do? Old Tyler Ross, the fire chief, hit him on the emergency pager Mitch slept with, and when he called the chief back from the powder room down the hall, Ross said he was looking at a homicide. That was a mighty rare thing out here in Atherton County. The Ram bumped along the dirt road that Mitch was always out of the county to Ord, then turned onto Evans, which passed through town and eventually led to a highway beside the Snake River. "Hey, Doc, are you in the office?" he asked over the truck's Motorola, rolling south. "Where else would I be?" Mitch grinned. Doc tended to get a little cranky at the end of her night shift. "I put that address in your GPS. It drew a blank. Help me out, will you?" "I just relayed the address Chief Ross gave me." "Well, you can locate his pumpers on the radio grid, can't you? Check in on them and just tell me where they are." Roger that, Sheriff." "Wait one." Mitch watched the highway dash flash in his headlights while he awaited a response. With his windows down, he listened to the night insects buzzing in the wheat fields. Cruising along the Snake at a relaxed 35. He enjoyed the cool air settling along the banks. He'd always liked waking up before everyone else, even as a boy. It made him feel like he was getting a head start on the day, and that invigorated feeling surged through him as he caught the scent of the sagebrush. But then he reprimanded himself. It was a homicide that had dragged him out of bed. "Okay, I got a 20, Doc said when she returned. "Stay on 129 until you're a mile or so south of Hostler. Must be an unmarked road or something. The pumpers are near Ashton Creek down there. There's no road registered with the county, so it's going to be private. Mitch thought that through. He knew Clarkston like the top of his scuff, Justin's. He tried to picture where a couple of big pumper trucks might access Ashton Creek, south of Holliston. There was nothing but rolling ranching, baked yellow after spring drought. Thanks, Doc, he concluded. I'll find it. As it turned out, the fire wasn't that hard to locate. 5 miles south of town, he saw the 2 county engines and the fire chief's red pickup with lights blazing across a broad field. Dawn was still an hour off, but stars were winking out, signaling its approach. The sheriff soon spotted the narrow gravel road to access the ranch and roared the ram across it with his patrol lights flashing. Now that he was here, facing the hills beyond Ashton Creek, he recognized the property. It had belonged to Doc Sutton, who eventually got tired of playing gentleman farmer in the blowing cold winters and pulled stakes for Sarasota. If Mitch recalled correctly, a young guy who come up from California bought the place. And because he was a young guy from California, Mitch hadn't paid much attention to the going on down here. It seemed like 2 or 3 fellas like that were moving to this part of the country every week. The sheriff wasn't sure what the Californian planned to do with this 300-acre property. He didn't see any cattle in his headlights, only the big red pumpers, a gavel of exhausted firemen, and the charred remains of a barn. Its embers still glowing. Smoke drift over the field as if Mitch were standing on the wrong side of the bonfire. The sheriff parked around, shrugged out, and hitched up his Wranglers. Tyler Ross, the chief, looked like hell in his yellow Nomex turnout gear. His face was streaked with soot, and the men standing around him gazed at the ground with hangdog expressions. What the hell happened here? The sheriff asked. Ross rubbed his face with a handkerchief, smearing the soot, then blew his nose. Ugly. 4 deceased. We all went in right before the roof caved. Dog led us to them. Thought someone might still be alive. Oh, shit. Any of your people hurt? No, Ross replied. We're okay. The victims, though, another story. You said 4 people. You mean in the barn, not in the house? Yeah, they're in the barn. We went for the house first and found it empty, and they burned it in the barn. Like they got trapped in there. They were shot, Mitch. As soon as we knew it was a crime scene, we put out the fire and did what we could to preserve it. Wickham removed his hat and placed it over his heart as if in prayer. His eyes roamed over the property. A pretty simple scheme. The house fields in the driveway looked fine, except for the pumpers, which would likely ruin the chance of finding the perpetrator's tire print. The barn was partially collapsed, glowing like a heap of hot coal. You mentioned a dog, Ty. What dog? That one, over there. Mitch yanked his mat light off his belt and aimed it at the home. The 2-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch stood to the right of the barn, slightly uphill. An American flag hung at an angle over the steps. The house was dark, but the front door stood open. A black Labrador retriever lay on the porch with his chin on his paws, watching him. How's that, Chief? Mitch asked. You were saying the dog was in the barn? No, she was trying to get into the barn, scratching like hell at the wood where it hadn't caught fire yet. The roof was burning by then. The chief clenched his jaw, swallowed, and inclined his head at the ruins. Whole family in there. Mitch looks like 2 kids and 2 parents. We never had the chance to save them. I think they were probably already dead. Look at me like they were bond first, then shot. Mitch Pell, bond. He repeated. Yeah, I didn't see any brass casings on the floorboards. That's your department. But they each have signs of bullet wounds to the head. You'll see what I mean. The sheriff tugged his hat onto his head and swept his flashlight over the smoldering beams. What remained of the charred roof laid in an angle, dripping and steaming from the fire hose water. He shifted the beam to the 2-story farmhouse, allowing it to rest on the open front door. Was the house like that when you arrived? The door? No. We went in the house on arrival to evacuate the family just in case. Door was unlocked. Place was empty. The dog burst out of the rear laundry room and ran for the barn. No sign of struggle in the house. Not that I saw, but I'm no expert. Come on, Mitch. I take you into the barn. Put these on. I warn you. It's not for the faint of heart. After donning a Nomex coat and swapping his hat for a helmet, Mitch ducked under one smoldering beam after another. Following the chief, the wood hissed and popped onto his ears. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his throat rasped. We didn't move, the fireman said. There you go. The sheriff raised a handkerchief to his nose, then the smell of a burnt people reached him. He could see 4 corpses sitting upright in folding metal chairs that hadn't caught fire. As corpses go, they were oddly preserved, dried and desiccated by the fire, which added to the barn's hideous hell. God help us, Mitch murmured. He looked away, closed his eyes, and breathed through his handkerchief. It was a struggle to get back to examining the crime scene, but such was the job. Their arms had been pulled back and bonded to the chairs. The chairs squatted and inspected their wrists for the flashing light, with the flashing light. Their flesh had puffed out, biting onto the copper wire used as binding. He wanted to vomit. His breath caught despite his professional duty. He needed a few seconds. He stood and looked away. I know, the chief sympathized with a thick gloved hand on the sheriff's shoulder. The killer wanted to bind them with something that wouldn't melt or burn. Mitch steeled himself and took a knee to examine the smoking remains of the male, presumably the father. His face was stained in dark blood that had oozed from a hole near his right temple. Some vile, hateful bastard had shot the man where he sat. The wife and kids had suffered the same fate as the detective. Mitch had seen all kinds of twisted, grim mayhem. Nothing as bad as this. How the fire report come in? Mitch asked, standing, his voice low. The neighbor up the creek, George Butters, called it in. He was up caring for a co-leaky horse when he smelled the smoke. He drove out and saw the fire. I'll talk to George, Mitch remarked. You know anything else about these people? I put on records while waiting for you. Property owned by a fella named Cole Hunt. He bought it off Doc Sutton last year. According to George, the wife was Mark. Kids are Maddie and Robbie, 14 and 12. Sadly, I think that's who we are looking at here, my dear Lord. By the time the sun crashed the rolling brown hills, Mitch had 3 of his 5 deputies roping off the house and the barn remnant with yellow crime scene tape. The sheriff had never handled one that ran across a whole property, but that's what he was looking at. There were no signs of forcible entry onto the house, and sadly much of the usable evidence was likely consumed by fire in the barn. Disgusted by what transpired here, the first responders refused to leave. While the chief looked for the primer, the arsonist used for ignition. The rest of his crew assisted the sheriff and surveyed the property. Mitch asked them to inspect the dirt halfway perimeter for tire treads that differed from the relatively new F-215 Super Duty they discovered in the garage. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The Ashton County Sheriff's Office wasn't large. However, Mitch's experience was a detective in Spokane, 2 hours to the north, had made him the primary investigator for 3 municipal departments in 2 countries. Whether he liked it or not, he'd be the lead detective on his murder case. He and his deputies would gather the bodies and evidence for transport to the crime lab in Spokane, operated by the Washington State Patrol. That's when the main forensic work will begin. But first, he needed to secure the scene. The dog sniffed at his boots and nudged his knees. The sheriff lifted her onto the Ram's back seat and stroked her ears, wondering what living nightmare the poor creature had witnessed. Perhaps there was one good thing that could emerge from this. Me and Molly hadn't had a dog since the last of the kids moved out 5 years ago. Molly said it was so they could travel, but they never did, really, except to visit her good friend in Seattle, 6 hours to the west. If no one claimed this handsome lab after the notice went out, then Mitch intended to keep her. The name on her collar read Luna. Intending to begin the investigation from his truck's computer, he suddenly recalled some beef jerky in his seat console and offered it to her. "Hey there, Luna. Cruel on this." She sniffed at it, but showed no interest in meeting, choosing instead to rest his chin on her paws as though she'd been in the back of his truck 1,000 times. On the luminous watch from amber eyes, Schmitz got to work on the keyboard of his dash mouse computer. He quickly confirmed what the first chief had said. According to the Ashton County Assessor's Office, the property owner was Cole Hunt. A previous mailing address indicated that the family had moved from Coronado near San Diego. Maddie and Robbie were students at the local public schools. As Mitch waited for his deputies to report in, he rubbed Luna's ears and sipped the coffee that Dot had brought from the station. Next, he double-checked on Mr. Cole Hunt, the property owner. Credit report showed Hunt paid his bills on time. The property tax records said the same. The man had no criminal history, no file of any kind. Mitch thumbed through the mail his deputy had pulled from the box along the road. The usual stuff: junk credit card offers and insurance bill. He performed a plain old Google search and waded through a dozen links for other people's names: Cole, Marla, Maddie, and Robbie, but came up with nothing useful, not even on Facebook. Mitch thought that was odd. Then again, Hunt was from Southern California. For all the sheriffs knew, the man might be a retired tech whiz who understood enough about the internet to want to disconnect from it entirely. There were plenty of those types out in these hills these days, although most seems to settle across the river in Lewiston, Idaho. When a deputy interviewed George Butters, who owned a nearby ranch and had reported the fire, he mentioned that Hunt kept a herd of cattle on the southern part of the property beyond the creek. Hunt didn't ride horses. Instead, he used his ATV to tend to the herd. He had sought out George for advice on ranching. That got Mitch's attention twitching. While stroking the dog's head, he tried to remember if he heard anything about Hunt down at the Washington Cattlemen's Club, where he played poker every Thursday. The Cattlemen were instrumental in supporting Mitch's campaign, and for that reason, he never missed a game. Hey, Hal, Harold Wagner ran the Cattlemen's Club and answered on the third ring. "Morning, Mitch." Kinda an early one. "Yeah, I got something going. Wish I didn't." "Crime?" Wagner asked. "Probable homicide. The victim is a fellow named Cole Hunt. The sheriff felt he needed to omit the family's gory details, such as shock had to be handled carefully in a small town like Clarkston. Hunt's place is out here by the creek. According to George Butters, he's been running a few head of those hills. You know him. I know Hunt. He's dead. Yeah. Wagner remained silent for a moment, then offered, I hate to hear that, though I didn't know him well. He's got about 200 heads of Angus in the hills over the creek. Was he doing all right with them? Any problems? Lots of problems. Some of the boys around here had a betting pool going on when he got into the foreclosure. Plenty of people anxious to buy that land. The creek's good water source. Hot as it's been, nobody would have wanted to come by it this way. Jesus. As Mitch saw it, Wagner had given him his first lead. Hunt's land was valuable. Someone wanted it. But murdering the whole family, that didn't add up. Luna raised her head and lit her lips. Mitch retrieved the jerky from the seat console. This time she ate it. The sheriff returned to his thoughts, rubbing his nose as he struggled to shake off the memory of the stench. Based on the execution-style killing, whatever the Hunts had got up to had pissed off some mighty mean hombres. In Mitch's view, that was usually about money, and at least according to how Wagner, Cole was losing it. Then again, he was from California. Maybe he was sitting on a pile tucked away in a bank somewhere, in which case this might be a robbery. Luna nudged his shoulder, causing Mitch to spill out the rest of the jerky bag while she ate. He searched his computer for evidence of Cole Hunt's employment. Since the man was relatively new to the state, the Washington databases weren't helpful. He scraped Hunt's social security number from the Atherton County Assessor's office and used it to check Hunt's W-9 history with the IRS. That's when the sheriff hit a brick wall. According to the IRS, there was no such security number, social security number. How the hell was that possible? He was tapping his fingers, sipping his coffee, and pondering the vagaries of bureaucracy when Luna nudged him again. This time she growled and barked insistently at something she saw through the windshield. And just as humans have been behaving since the Paleolithic period, Mitch Whitcomb heeded his K9 companion warning and rarely studies the road. 3 black Suburbans were speeding down the highway. The lead SUV had a flashing blue light on the dash as it turned onto the gravel drive. The sheriff groaned and shook his head. That convoy could mean only one thing: feds.